This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Baseball Hour, where Neil and we talk about 3 to 4 baseball topics each and every week on Thursday of every week throughout this baseball season. Today we are talking about the 4 main topics that we're talking about today. Number 1, Clayton Kershaw and the perfect game that wasn't. Number 2, Seiya Suzuki, the Japanese import outfielder that has been taking the National League by storm throughout the first 2 weeks of the baseball season. Number 3, we're talking about Vlad Guerrero Jr., who had a monster 3 home run game against the Yankees this past week. And finally, we got to talk about Mike Trout and Byron Buxton, maybe the 2 most electric players in all of baseball. And of course, they can't stay healthy right now, and both of them went down with injuries last week. So topic 1, Neil, I think this was the biggest, probably national topic around baseball last week. Clayton Kershaw was facing our beloved Minnesota Twins. He had a perfect game through 7 innings, only had thrown 80 pitches, and he didn't finish the game. Heck, he didn't even come out for the 8th inning. What was your thoughts on Kershaw's perfect game that wasn't, Neil?
My thoughts are just how just disappointed I was just to not see him get a chance to make a play for the perfect game, because it just would have been such a fun thing to follow, to see Clayton Kershaw take a crack at going after a perfect game. I mean, is it one of the most unique things in sports to do, is to throw a perfect game?
There's only been 23 perfect games, in 130 plus years of Major League Baseball.
Yeah. And, after last season where there was a ton of no-hitters, we kind of got used to having no-hitters come up every once in a while. But, a perfect game, and especially a perfect game for someone like Clayton Kershaw, who, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and all that type of stuff. But just to see him, just go after it, it just made me sad that he wasn't able to get a chance for it. And I understand the rationale to do it. And I don't think Kershaw is any less of a pitcher because, he didn't want to go out there and do it, but it was just disappointing more than anything else, because as a baseball fan, it's just something I want to follow. And especially, since they're pitching against the Twins, granted, I wanted the Twins to do well, but, it's just, it would have been a fun thing to follow just to see him get a chance. And I don't know. I would have loved to see them keep him in there. What do you think?
Well, my thought on it was, first of all, like you said, extremely disappointed that we didn't get a chance where the entire sports world could tune in to seeing Kershaw come back out for the 8th inning, because this was a day game in the middle of the week. So if you were on Twitter or you were following baseball throughout that day, you saw that Kershaw had something going, right? And it would have been one of those things where all eyes would have tuned in for that 8th and 9th inning. I think one thing that fired me up about it, though, was people were trying to blame this on like the modernity of baseball. Like, oh, look at the modern baseball analytics tell Kershaw that he can't go out for this game. Actually, it was nothing like that. It was actually a very old school decision where Kershaw and the pitching coach and the Dodgers organization, they had a plan for him based off of a pitch count, which is a very old school thing, old school way to measure pitchers. And if you remember, like, Kershaw wasn't even going to come back to the Dodgers. The Dodgers were talking last year that they were going to move on from Kershaw because he's had so many injuries over the past couple of years and he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And he's kind of getting to the twilight of his career. He's 34 years old. So once I saw this and I saw what is going on here, and I got past the initial disappointment, my mind immediately went to, it's April in Minnesota, and Kershaw is coming into this game with a plan that he's not going to throw any more than 75 or 80 pitches, no matter what the outcome of that game was. And he's just going to take himself out. So this was not an instance where the pitching coach made the call, Dave Roberts made the call. No. This was decided before the game. This was decided probably a week before the game. This was decided 2 days before the game, whenever they put that plan in place. And Clayton Kershaw has a type of Hall of Fame career. You already said it. He's got the ring. He's got the Cy Youngs. He's got the stats. Frankly, he might be the only pitcher in Major League Baseball that didn't need to go out in the 8th inning to prove that he could throw up a perfect game, because to him, what's the big knock on Kershaw been his entire career? Postseason numbers. So what's a perfect game in April against the Twins mean to Clayton Kershaw's resume if he's not healthy for the postseason? And I think that's a bigger issue to a 34-year-old guy that's throwing in 40-degree weather, the long-term implications of what going out past his plan would be to his arm. It might not be a big deal for a 17-year-old kid, but it is a big deal to a 34-year-old guy.
Yeah, and I understand that completely. I guess kind of what fired me up was more, some of people kind of reacting to the backlash of the decision to take Kershaw out. There's a podcast I was listening to where they're talking about it's really the people complaining about Kershaw being taken out are these old school people who, are mad about analytics and mad about how the game's changing, all that stuff. I just didn't see that at all as being the reaction to Kershaw being taken out. I think it was more just people just wanted to see Kershaw make a run at a perfect game and were disappointed that didn't happen. More than anything else.
I completely agree with you. This had nothing to do with people being mad at old school people. I actually saw the exact opposite of that. But
yeah. No one was saying Kershaw isn't tough or anything like that. I didn't see anything like that. But I don't know. They just people making a straw man that it's really these old fuddy-duddies who don't like how the game's changing. And really, I don't like that they took him out because I just think it's one of those things that you just you only get probably one chance. Oh, Kershaw may have more chances at it, but he's not as good as he used to be. He's not as dominant as he used to be, I should say, but he might, he can still get guys out. But I just would have loved to see him have that moment. But I understand completely why they took him out. I understand the rationale, and you put it pretty well. But it just, as a baseball fan, it's one of those things that still gets me, no matter who's pitching. If I see a perfect game going through 5 or 6, I'm tuning in no matter who it is.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I wanted to see it, but I completely understand the rationale for it. And I don't think this was one of those in-game situations. I don't think the score mattered. I don't think the outcome mattered. I think just Clayton Kershaw, like I said, he might be the one guy in Major League Baseball. Maybe Jacob deGrom is the other because he's had a lot of similar type of injury issues to Kershaw that would go out of the game. Like I would throw Max Scherzer in there, but Scherzer would say, screw the plan. I'm going back out for the 8th inning. But other than that, I can't think of one other pitcher that would stick to the plan. Maybe Rich Hill because he's 80 years old.
Yeah. The only thing I hope for Kershaw's sake, and like I said, he doesn't need to do anything to prove to anyone how good of a pitcher he is, but I still hope that he, in the back of his mind, he would have liked to have gotten a perfect game, regardless of, I understand he likes to stick to the plan, all that stuff, but I still would have, I hope that he, in somewhere in the, when it's maybe, 95 degrees and sunny in Los Angeles summer, and he's in the summer and he's more warmed up and all that stuff. Maybe at that point, if he's got a perfect game going, he's more in a better position to stay in, and I hope he goes for it at some point, but he may not ever get that chance again.
And I think you will. And to your point, yeah, I hope it hurts a little bit and it nags at him that like when his career's over, he's like, man, I never got the perfect game and I could have had it that day. But it would be a totally different story if it's 70 degrees in Los Angeles in June and this was April, 40 degrees in Minnesota when he's coming off an injury-plagued year last year. He's actually had 2 straight injury-plagued years coming off, and he's gone deep into the playoffs the last couple of years. So I think that mattered a lot, especially when Kershaw might not have even been coming back to the Dodgers in the offseason. He wants to make sure that he's doing everything he can to bring LA another title. I think that's what was more important here.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Sam. Mm-hmm.
Neil, here's a trivia question for you. Kershaw has been in the majors since 2008 when he was 20 years old. He's now 34 years old. It's 2022. He's made 381 career appearances in the major leagues. How many wins do you think Clayton Kershaw has? For a guy that's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, what's your guess?
160.
He's got 187.
Okay. That's actually more than I thought. Like he's going to get 200 this year, hopefully.
Yeah,
well, he may not.
he doesn't really have a chance to hit 300, but I think if he stays healthy, throws another 5 or 6 years, he could potentially get to 250.
Yeah.
Which is probably the new 300. You'll have Verlander hit that probably, if Verlander stays healthy here. Verlander's at, I think, 227 or so. So he might hit that here next season.
Yeah. And that's one of those numbers that still matters to me. It's one of those things like, a lot of the new school guys, they are the analytics guys will kind of disparage the wins totals. But it's one of those stats too, where over the course of a career, wins totals, you're not winning a ton of games unless you're a top tier starting pitcher. It may not win a ton. It may not mean a ton over the course of a 20 game stretch or that sort of thing, because you need run support and all that stuff. But it's one of those stats that it still has a lot of meaning to me. I remember watching CC Sabathia. I thought that if CC could have stayed healthy, he probably got to like 215 when he was still like 33 years old. And if he would have put together a lot of good seasons, he maybe could have got to 300. It would have been a stretch. But that's one of those things I still kind of follow, and I like to see those milestones hit.
Next topic I want to talk about, Neil, is Vlad Jr. So Vlad Jr., did you see this last week at Yankee Stadium? Vlad Jr. hit 3 bombs in the same game. All the while, I think after the first home run, he had his finger stepped on and he had a huge gash in his finger. Normally that would take a guy out of a game, but of course they're playing in Yankee Stadium. He's got 1 home run already, and he goes to hit 2 more home runs with a huge gash on his finger. And it was just one of these things where it takes so much to be a great baseball player, especially to make the major leagues, to be an all-star in the major leagues. And then there's these certain guys that are just on a totally different level, like your Jacob deGroms, like your Max Scherzers, your Clayton Kershaws. But then on the hitter side, you have a guy like Vlad Guerrero, who might be the most naturally gifted hitter that we've seen come into the major leagues over the last 5 years or so. He's absolutely incredible to watch. And what a show he put on at Yankee Stadium last week.
Yeah, I agree, Tim. And what I like about Vladimir Guerrero and watching him hit is just it's fun to watch a guy who just goes up there and just swings as hard as he possibly can every single at bat. Watching him, I kind of think back to when I used to play baseball and just being like so like worked up about mechanics, and not saying he doesn't probably his great mechanics and all that stuff, but being worried about striking out and all that stuff. I wish I would just gone out there like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and just took a hack at it like he does. It's refreshing to see, and it's almost I kind of think some of the newer guys who are coming up in the league, they have a lot of these guys in America, at least, maybe they all have a little bit similar swings and stuff like that. But it's kind of refreshing to see someone like Vlad Guerrero just go up there and take a hack.
It looks so natural too. Like you see that guy in the batter's box and you're like, boy, this guy was born to play baseball. And really, if you look up and down the Blue Jays lineup, what an exciting line. Like they got Bo Bichette, right?
He's fun to watch too. Yeah.
They got George Springer, right? People forget that George Springer's center field for Toronto. They got Chapman from the Angels at third base, or excuse me, the A's at third base, and they got Vlad Jr. Like they're going to put up a ton of runs. They're actually my World Series pick coming out of the AL this year. But people, because Ohtani was such a headline last year, you forget that Vlad Jr. had a really, really good case for the MVP. Listen to Vlad Jr.'s stats last year. The guy played in 161 games, scored 123 runs, hit 48 bombs, 29 doubles, hit 311, had an on-base percentage over 400. He was absolutely incredible last season, led the league in 4 different statistical categories. If it wasn't for Ohtani doing what he did, first time since Babe Ruth on about everything, Vlad Jr. was last year's MVP.
Wow. Yeah. I did not realize his numbers were that good. 311. And he was only 20. He's only 22 years old too. That's incredible.
He almost won the Triple Crown last year.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't realize his numbers were that good. And he doesn't look like he, is as free of a swinger in terms of like not having an eye at the plate like his dad did too. Like he's actually like a all around hitter who draws walks and all that stuff too. So Yeah, he's gonna be fun to watch this year.
Well, and last year, if you remember, Toronto, because of COVID, they played all their home games in in Buffalo. They played all their home games in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, that's right. And that's probably another reason why he didn't get the publicity that maybe he should have, because they didn't play one game in Toronto. That's
No,
right.
it was incredible. And same thing this year. Like Toronto has an unbelievably exciting lineup. I don't think anybody really cares about them, and they're probably going to win the AL East over New York and Boston.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to see a team like that in the AL East too, when they're going up against the Yankees and the Red Sox each year. They could just do what the Orioles are doing and just kind of lay over and die, but they're actually trying to field like a competitive team and make a run at winning the league which is fun to watch. It's maybe something they had to do too, since they didn't play any home games last year, to get the fans back too, to make sure that they are a competitive team that gets the fans back in their stadium this year.
If you were a better baseball player, I would envision you swinging like Vlad Jr.
I know that's too much of a head case. I, I wish I just was a free swinger and just went up there and took a hack at it. I was just too worried about striking out.
Yeah. Do you think Vlad Jr. ever is worried about striking out?
No. And he just goes up there and just gives it his all.
So speaking of striking out, one of the stories this past week was Stephen Kwan from the Cleveland Guardians, which I'm still struggling with. He didn't swing and miss his first like 70 swings or something like that of the season. Do you see that stat?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. And that was something I didn't even really know who he was.
He's like a 5'9" outfielder, played his college ball at Oregon State.
Okay.
So maybe in the similar realm of like Jacoby Ellsbury was another under 6 foot outfielder from Oregon State. He had a 5-for-5 game in the first week. He was hitting 800 after the first series. He's come back down. He's hitting like 485 now, but kind of a cool story. You always have these stories in the first couple of weeks of the baseball season where somebody gets hot and it's like, this guy's going to be the rookie of the year. This guy's going to be the all-star, whatever. Like, I'm curious to see what Stephen Kwan's going to be doing in June. My guess is he's going to be hitting 268, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and you just don't see a lot of those type of players anymore who are contact first, don't swing and miss any like they used to. So yeah, it'd be fun to see if he has a good year.
Next topic, Neil, Seiya Suzuki. So in our first Moonlight Baseball Hour, we talked about Suzuki being one of the guys that I wanted to watch this year, especially after basically Kosuke Fukudome for the Cubs about 10, 15 years ago was a little bit of a letdown. I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot of it of a letdown for Chicago, even though if you look back on his stats now, Fukudome was actually a pretty decent player. He just wasn't like the savior coming over from Japan like maybe Ohtani is for the Angels. But Fukudome actually is 45 or 46 years old. He's still playing in the Japanese league today. So like that guy's a legendary Hall of Fame type of baseball player. But Seiya Suzuki, the next Japanese import here for the Cubs, had an unbelievable first 2 weeks. He's currently hitting 429. He's got 4 dingers. And he's really been the Cubs' best player so far. And it's been awesome to see as a guy coming in the wake of Fukudome to really deliver right away when the Cubs needed it. You know, they need a guy like this.
Yeah, and it's almost a shame for his sake too, because as far as Japanese players go, he's coming in the wake not just of Fukudome but also of Ohtani. And we haven't seen a ton of Japanese players, at least hitters, break through. We've seen a lot of pitchers come over from Japan and break through, but other than maybe
Godzilla for the Yankees.
Yeah, Hideki Matsui was a really good hitter for a while, but even him, I mean, he was like a god coming from Japan, and he was a really solid player for the Yankees, but not quite the type of hitter that obviously was over in Japan. But we've had a lot of guys like the Park guy. He was from Korea, but he didn't quite pan out for the Twins. You also had that Nishioka hitter. You've had some like Kung Ho Park or for the Pirates a couple years ago who's been pretty good. but it hasn't been, you haven't seen the hitters translate quite as well until Ohtani last year. And so I hope that Suzuki, has a better career than those guys do, because I like watching a lot of those Japanese players hit because they have that kind of a unique style, and it's fun to watch them.
Also, Suzuki seems to be coming over at like the right time. Like sometimes the Japanese players, like Ichiro, didn't come over till he was like almost 30 years old. He just played forever. Fukudome, I think, was 30 when he came over as well. Suzuki's 27, so he could have a really good 8-year run here while he's still really in his prime, right? And we're getting to his best baseball.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, he's coming over with a, in his prime years too. So I think the Cubs got him at the right time here. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to keep these numbers up. I'm looking at his stats right now. He's batting over 420 right now.
Yeah.
He's almost got one WAR already in just 28 at bats. So yeah, his numbers are unreal right now. 319 OPS plus. That's incredible.
Isn't it weird when you look at Suzuki? Maybe it's because after Ohtani's like a 6'4", 220-pound stud. Like, he looks like a Greek god. He's built, he's strong. And I was expecting Seiya Suzuki to kind of be in that same mold after Ohtani. Seiya Suzuki's the same size as Fukudome. He's like 5'11", 170 pounds. And I was just shocked after looking at his Japanese stats, because he was like a power hitter in Japan. He's been a power hitter. He's crushing the ball for Chicago. And I was a little bit surprised to see that he's essentially my size.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got like a lot of these Japanese players, like they don't come, super big. Otani's the exception, but they have like a strength to them that's not like built from like a big beefy body, but it's like a flexible type of strength or something. It's an interesting swing they have.
They're able to generate power in a different way for sure.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that in the way they swing. Like they still have that kind of that Ichiro. I mean, he's a righty, but he's kind of got that like
they coil.
They coil at the ball, to generate that leverage.
Yeah, like some pitchers coil. I used to coil like where you're pointing your front butt cheek. If you're a right-handed pitcher, your left butt cheek, you're pointing that at the catcher, and you're really coiling and then kind of unspooling. And that's what Ichiro would do. Ichiro would really coil around, and you see that with Suzuki. You see it with Ohtani. Ohtani does it too.
Yeah, he definitely does it too. But he's also built. I mean, he's 6'3". What is he, 6'4"?
He's huge. And when he connects,
huge.
I mean, that's why he hits 500-foot home runs. It's unreal.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Final topic, Neil. And maybe we're trying to be positive here on the Moonlight Baseball Hour, but it's hard to ignore when Trout and Buxton get hurt, right? These are guys that are kind of inevitably linked together because they were coming up in the minor leagues. They were always the number 1 and number 2 guys coming up through the minor leagues. Trout, of course, has surpassed all of expectations. Buxton, when he's been healthy, has been the player he was billed to be, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then, of course, both of them get hurt within the first 10 games of the baseball season this year. Knock on wood, it looks like they're both going to be able to stay healthy, but both injuries are averting disaster, and we'll see them back here in a short period of time. But what happened when you saw that Buxton was getting hurt off that opening double against the Cubs?
Well, initially, I saw him walking off the field fine, and I had a hope that he would be back. But then I thought back to all the other Buxton injuries that we've been through, and then I kind of, had a sinking feeling in my stomach, like, oh, this is just another Buxton injury, and he's going to be out. This is going to either nag at him for the year, or he's going to be out for weeks and weeks, and we're not going to see him again. It's just I don't know what it is with some of these guys. If Buxton has bad luck, or he's just more susceptible to injuries, or whatever the case may be. But with him and also with Trout, it's just you want them to be able to put together a stretch of 162 games to just see what they could do over that type of stretch, to see what numbers they could put up, to see if they can elevate their teams to be have more success in the playoffs and that type of thing. So it's just really a shame. But yeah, I mean, I had the worst possible thoughts initially on that Buxton injury.
And what's still exciting about this season with both Buxton and with Trout is that they are paired in the order and on their team with all-stars, right? So Buxton has Correa now, right? And so it's Buxton and Correa in the top third of the Twins order. It's Ohtani and Trout for the Angels. And we talked about this in the last episode of the Moonlight Baseball Hour, but if you have Mike Trout doing 10 WAR a year, if you have Shohei Ohtani doing 10 WAR a year, the Angels have to be making the playoffs. Like, the math just doesn't work for them not to be any good at that level, right? If those guys are collectively 20 games over replacement, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Same thing with like Buxton and Correa. Like, Buxton at his best is a 10 to 12 WAR guy. Correa is a 6 to 8 WAR guy. Like, these are playoff teams if those guys can be healthy.
Right. And even then, like, for a guy like Trout, I want to see him, can he hit 60 home runs or something like that? Or can he, put up these numbers over a course of 162 season that you would expect from someone who's having the start to a career that he's having, which is pretty much unprecedented. Last year, I think, was it last year or the year before? I mean, his numbers were unbelievable for the stretch of time when he was playing, and then he got hurt, of course, and he wasn't able to finish it out. But you'd love to see him these type of guys, see what they can do over 162 game season. And we just need to watch him in the playoffs too, because guys like Trout need to be highlighted too. And I think it helps him too, maybe not being the guy anymore in Anaheim. He has Ohtani over there now too, who's getting a lot more of the publicity. So I don't know. I just hope I see them back here soon.
And I really want to see like a Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle type of thing, or, in Gil Hodges. And you have that in Southern California right now, where you have Mookie Betts for the Dodgers. You have Mike Trout for the Angels, and they're 50 miles apart or 40 miles apart, however far apart their stadiums are. And for both of those guys to be healthy at the same time and put up like historic seasons would be really fun, especially when you have, Fernando Tatis Jr. with San Diego and Machado for San Diego. Like, there's a lot of exciting baseball going on in Southern California. And I really want to see that. And of course, Byron Buxton needs his like Joe Mauer MVP type of season. Like, you'll never be able to take away that 28 home run MVP year that Mauer had. And he was healthy. He was in his prime. Buxton, all of that is still out in front of him for that. And I want to see the 35 home run, 50 steal year where Byron Buxton hits 290. And I think it's possible, it could still happen this year, but I want to see what that's like, because when he's healthy, same with Trout, it's historic. It's not like just another George Springer or something. It's as good as we've ever seen.
Yeah. The one thing I don't understand about Trout is, he gets a lot of, I don't know if it's criticism is the right word, but there's a lot of discussion around Trout not being like the, the celebrity that maybe the top players in other sports are. But then it's kind of, I look at I'm on his Twitter page right now, and he's got 2.5 million followers. Like, I would just not expect that from someone like Mike Trout, who I'm going through his Twitter page, just like boring retweets and tweets about the weather and that type of thing. It's like he has like a following, like 2.5 million followers it's not on the level of like the top NBA players, maybe, because those guys are kind of on a different level of social media stardom, but it's pretty significant and up there with a lot of the top stars, I would imagine. And so it doesn't really jive with like the narrative that Mike Trout isn't like this really popular celebrity. I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, it just seems like Trout is boring, and people talk about him as being boring, and no one knows who he is and all that type of thing. But then I look at his follower count, and it's really high.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's a little bit overblown. It's like, oh, if Mike Trout, the best baseball player on the planet's walking down the street, nobody would recognize him. It's like, okay, if if Deshaun Watson's walking down the street, I doubt many people would recognize him either. Like, it's just a totally different thing. Like, in comparing baseball stars or even football stars to NBA stars, because it's just a totally different animal what the NBA has done with social media, I don't think is completely fair. But yeah, like Ohtani, Trout, these guys are huge stars with huge followings. They're way over, millions of followers, and people know who Mike Trout is. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at Aaron Rodgers has 2 million followers on Instagram. Mike Trout has 1.2 million. Now, people would just assume that Aaron Rodgers is just like exponentially a bigger star than Mike Trout is, and more of a household name. And he has more followers and all that stuff. But it's not like he's way out of the ballpark of Mike Trout.
Yeah, for as often as Aaron Rodgers is on ESPN and everything, and Mike Trout isn't, it just shows you how strong baseball is.
Right. Yeah. And I think it also helps that, baseball is more of a international sport than, football is. Definitely. I don't think many people around the world would know who Aaron Rodgers is, but I'd assume you go to Japan, you go to South Korea, you go to the Dominican, they all know who Mike Trout is. So I don't think baseball gets as much credit for being an international sport than it should.
To wrap it up, Albert Pujols has 2 home runs, and I just cannot believe it. That guy's like 45, 46 years old in real years. And he's only hitting against left-handed pitching, and he's doing pretty well. And I just cannot believe it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I was watching him stroll around the bases, and it was like watching some guy in a slow pitch softball game run around the bases. That was what it looked like to me. But I'm happy for him. I hope he gets to 700.
It's good for St. Louis. They'll be selling out for every Albert home run, and it'll be fun. But here's what postseason baseball is so much fun. And that's kind of why I want to see Trout. I want to see Pujols. I want to see these big names in the playoffs, because that's when baseball is super, super fun.
Yeah. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but it's like, that's one of the reasons why I talked about the Yankees a couple weeks ago. Cause I kind of think it's a lot more fun when the Yankees are involved in a lot of ways. Not saying I want them to win the World Series or make the World Series, but it's more fun when the Yankees are involved. It gets more media attention. A lot of the big name broadcasters and podcasters are now forced to talk about baseball because the Yankees are involved in it. And the Red Sox too, and the Dodgers generate that type of interest too. But it is kind of fun when the bigger teams are involved, because then, these other big name media companies are forced to talk about baseball.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Neil, that's our Moonlight Baseball Hour for this week.
Yeah.
Next week's another week.
Next week, if anyone has any topics, let me know. And we're trying to get better each week, guys. So just be patient with us.
Yeah, it's a long baseball season.
Yes, definitely.
All right, I'll end it with this: go play catch with somebody this week. If you're out there complaining about Kershaw, taking it easy, then get a glove on, go get a young kid in the neighborhood, or your son or your dad, and go play catch. I'll leave you with that.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.